Have you seen this? A spooky serial for kids that became an exemplar of British folk horror.
Welcome to Have You Seen This?
The world's only podcast about obscure, overlooked, and misbegotten media.
All discussions will be spoiler heavy.
You have been warned.
This show would not be possible without the support of our patrons. If you would like to support our show, join us at patreon.com/haveyouseenthis. Patrons get the show a week early, and $5 supporters also get access to our Discord. Or you can tip us at our Ko-fi. Visit the link in the show notes.
Yeah, I wanted to get that out of the way. The whole folk horror thing.
What about a movie about eggs and its yolk horror?
Okay. What about a couple of acoustic musicians, folk music horror?
Ooh. Yeah, that does create a tingle in my spine because folk is horrifying.
It's true.
You ever see that one
about,
guy from the Kingston Trio with like his, they all have their guitars like up around their nipples, and then there's that one guy with the no neck, just like strumming. Horrifying.
Yeah. Or what the knife and the spoon talk about, folk horror.
That fork has got a list a mile long of
there's just something
felonies.
off about it. Yeah, you can't hold soup in it. You can cut things with it, but it's not a knife. I don't know what it is.
It's too fucking pointy.
Yeah, it's a strange utensil. It is not of this world. It's indescribable.
Now, Tim, I really need your help with this one because this is advanced children's television. What are we talking about specifically?
Definitely, yeah. This is from the BBC. This was a 7-part series from '76, Children of the Stones. Now, if you've listened to the show before, you already know how much I love British horror, so anything I say in this episode is probably going to sound really familiar, and you can just skip this one. You can listen to our episode on Hammer Horror, our episode on Pendas Fen, on Ghost Stories, The Wicker Man, Ghost Watch, Threads. This is, another entry in, wholesome, scarring entertainment from the BBC.
Yeah, this is next level. I was kind of not prepared for this, even though I had read that this was considered one of the scariest children's shows of all time, and that it was aimed at children. And then
before Ghost Watch came along to scar children in the 80s, there was Children of the Stones.
Like, they didn't fuck around because
no,
not only does it not resemble where to even start? Just from the opening notes of what is the soundtrack, which is like awful moaning and shrieking.
Yeah, it has this like kind of discordant choral soundtrack.
Yeah, it's like the
just
King
like,
Singers,
with this chanting,
combined with the music from 2001 when the hominids start like touching the monolith. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's just like this spooky chanting, and that's like really the only kind of music that we get in this. So it really sets the mood from the outset.
Right. And then the next thing you get is a father and a son driving somewhere. And then they have a jokey little exchange about the word phantasmagoric.
Mm-hmm.
This is not your garden variety children's entertainment.
Right. But it is very much in line with so much other British horror that we've reviewed, and it does definitely fit the mold of, I forget what like kind of unified theory we were trying to use to explain it, but in one of our episodes, I feel like we should just change our focus to just being about British horror at this point. It's a rich vein.
It would be easier to pitch movies to you, to be honest.
For real, yeah. I'll talk endlessly about them. But yeah, one of the ideas that we kind of touched upon in an earlier episode was the idea of Britain itself being cursed. It is a cursed island with 1,000 years of bloody history, and people are still living on it.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Piers Morgan and tell me that island isn't cursed.
Yeah, see, exactly. So, yeah, it is very much of the land. It is like you say, there's these two characters that we're introduced to first. I don't even know where to start with how many other cool things I love that this touches on, because you have like I said, the two protagonists, you have Dr. Brake and his son Matthew coming into the town. It is established early on, just in a throwaway line, that they're here to do observations for the university. He's on a research grant, but he's like, well, I'll have to get some results, otherwise they're gonna pull my funding. So he's already committed to the premise, and
what child doesn't fear losing an academic grant?
No, I mean that's the father. The way that, because when you had mentioned and other people said online, like, can you believe that this was for kids?
Right.
Like I can absolutely see that it's directed to kids, because it directs it addresses teenage anxieties, because say you're a kid and your family moves somewhere, like you don't have any control over that. Mm-hmm. But again, like in the first scene, it's addressed by Matthew, where it's like, yeah, we're moving to a small town to live for the next 3 months, and he's like, yeah, well, suppose they're all nutters. And it's like, yeah, what if you have to adjust to this new environment? You've been plucked from like your safe home where you know how everything is, and then you have to adjust to this new one. And also it's like, yeah, what if everyone here is just a weirdo, and like this is where I'm stuck living? I'm sure that, in the UK that was, a very valid concern of being like, oh, I guess I just live in this shitty village for the rest of my life. And a girl just like going down to the pub and seeing like the same 3 people.
Yeah, like forever. In a never-ending time loop.
Yeah. So to say that it maybe isn't appropriate for kids, I think is missing the point.
Oh, I would never say that. It's just that, and sorry to cut you off, but
yeah,
the reason that it doesn't read immediately as being for children is the general sophistication of the writing. There is a lot of expository dialogue mixing science and mysticism, and there are a lot of scenes, and this was pointed out on Jonathan Coulthard's blog, who is an artist that I follow and who has written extensively about folk horror. Mm-hmm. He pointed out that there are a lot of scenes without kids in it, just adults talking to each other.
That's true. Yeah, you would think that it was a series directed at teens, but Matthew like disappears from the story for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Which would have been like half an episode when it was originally broadcast, because it is, him and his father, getting some character backstory and banter. I'm here on a research grant. His wife died 2 years ago. They have this strange painting that also works as a piece of expository scenery.
This is a kid who buys art.
Yeah.
It's kind of an extraordinary child.
Yeah. But then the sort of Lord of the Manor comes by, and Professor Brake is like, all right, grown-up stuff. Matthew, take a hike. And he's not even in it for like the rest of the episode.
Right. And boy, I do want to get to Ian Cuthbertson, I think his name is the main.
Yeah, he's Hendrix.
Yeah, the main antagonist, because this is the most chilling performance from a villain from the United Kingdom since Halloween 3: Season of the Witch. If I may crassly lump Ireland in with the British Isles, we'll assume Northern Ireland in this case.
Oh, we're already getting angry emails.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you about the time that I was canvassing with a gentleman from Ireland, and I had never been to Ireland, so I wrong-footedly said, "Oh, yeah, I've never been to that part of the UK."
Uh-oh.
And he's like, "Steady now." which is the pleasant Irish way of saying, "You better shut your fucking mouth."
And then later that day, when you got in your car and you turned the key.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I ordered myself a shot of Jaeger and a Guinness.
Yes. Now, mind you, this podcast does say up the raw, so don't get too mad when you write in. But anyway, yeah.
That was just me being stupid. I immediately realized my mistake.
Yeah. You learn quickly. This.
Otherwise I'll glass you.
This is another the other thing that makes this show very British is like just the embarrassment of good actors in the cast. Besides the villain, we also have Freddie Jones as a weird village man, the poacher.
Yeah, Thufir from Dune.
Yeah, and he absolutely crushes it in this part.
He's a great character actor.
Like his scenes are mesmerizing, even though most of his dialogue sounds like
I know we had just apologized for offending the Irish, but the character in this is Welsh, so
yeah. Well,
yeah, he, and apparently it was just like stayed in character the whole time. So that's commitment.
That's pretty
good on
cool.
you, Freddie Jones. Yeah.
I mean, like, I am very pro people sticking it to British people, so I say do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that works for the character too, because it's like no one is going to be comfortable around him. There's no point where like Freddie comes back and he's just like, yeah, for this scene I thought we blocked this, and we would do this, and my motivation for this is just like, no, of course, yeah, me medallion. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, and he just looks like
Fred, you're a weirdo,
crusty and unbalanced, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and sort of metatextually in the story, it is significant that his character is sort of one that exists outside of society. Like, he lives like a tramp inside this sanctuary, which is just like this disused mausoleum or something. Like, he's a poacher, which means like he catches his own food. Like, he doesn't do anything. He like doesn't have any family or any connections to the village. He just kind of like comes and goes as he pleases.
Right.
Because
Literally.
he's like an oddball. Yeah. But also it's because he's, ironically, as is befitting these stories, he's also kind of like the only sane person in this village. Like, he's the only one who really has a grasp of what's going on. But because he's so, I don't know, black-pilled, for lack of a better word, like, everything comes out as
black
nonsense.
Pudding.
Yeah. He ate the blancmange. So like it's trying to explain like a certain kind of insanity to a layman, where it's just like, look, this just isn't gonna work. Like, he is the like zero sanity NPC from like a Call of Cthulhu game, where it's like, let me tell you the harrowing story of what I experienced. And I do mention Call of Cthulhu specifically because just going through the whole story of Children of the Stones, I'm like, oh, this would make such an awesome Call of Cthulhu adventure. And of course, I have to like slap myself and be like, why do you think that is? What do you think the people who write these things grew up on?
There you go. Because this limited series has been spoken highly of by many prominent British actor writers, like Reece Shearsmith and Simon Pegg, and that kind of guy.
Yeah, and it's important that you mention Simon Pegg. One of the other Call of Cthulhu things that I want to mention too is that consider the protagonist of this movie. It is an astrophysicist, a museum curator, and their 2 children. Not your typical action heroes.
No.
Yeah.
This movie is for the SWATs.
Absolutely. It's for kids who like kids would gravitate to this if they were already watching like Doctor Who and like the Quatermass serials. Like, this is absolutely up their alley.
Kids love Nigel Neal teleplays.
Everyone loved Nigel Neal teleplays.
They should. Nigel Neal's
that's what I'm
fucking
saying.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is the stuff that was formative for like weird British sci-fi. Like, there's a point where Nigel Neal is like, Doctor Who owes me a fucking royalty check. Mm-hmm. Like, for just like the tropes that they trade in. It's like, yeah, I was doing this already. Thank you, you're welcome. Sure. Because it's just, monstrous threats from outer space affecting, mundane British sort of society, and also a brilliant enigmatic scientist who's there to save them. I'm just saying.
It's funny too, because this does feel somewhat in the vein of a Doctor Who, but like, and nothing against Doctor Who, because I do enjoy it, but Doctor Who does feel like a children's show. Yeah. And this is like, holy shit, like this is heavy, like in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it's really incredible stuff. And Yeah, you could work for decades just making things that are derivative of the sort of ideas and themes and tones in this. Not least of which, if you want to talk about, because the story is basically, and it seems like a very British story of two outsiders going to live in a weird little village. You need to look no further than The Wicker Man for this idea. I guess it's just something that if you grew up in the UK, where, like in the US, we have like, regional dialects and accents that vary by like state by state or like time zone by time zone.
Mm-hmm.
But, in the UK, like they'll be like, accents vary by a village.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is just like how compartmentalized everything is. So it's like, you could go 20 kilometers north and suddenly it's just like, oh, these people. so yeah, you don't want to go to the north, a place that is 2 hours from here. Oh, it's totally
You definitely
different.
don't want to run into any scallies.
Yeah. Although that said, I mean, if someone said, Tim, I need you to go to Orange County, I'd be like, oh,
right.
Yeah. So where do I get off? But
imagine getting trapped in a time loop in Orange County.
I'd rather not.
Yeah.
Hey, every day you're at Disneyland.
Ugh,
whatever.
That's a screen yourself awake nightmare.
Sorry. Yeah, I forgot we need to shit on Disneyland, like we did in our Rocketeer episode.
Have a brazzle dazzle day forever.
Yeah, we got some feedback about that. It was fun. But what I was saying, so this pervasive UK trope of just like going to a weird village, or as the prisoner so succinctly put it, the village. He's a normal man, an independent person who finds himself trapped in this quirky oddball society that he cannot escape. Yep. Absolutely, that seems like a resonant British trope. So the same thing is happening in Children of the Stones, and as you mentioned, it isn't just like Reese Shearsmith, Mark Gatiss, all the guys from League of Gentlemen, which is also Royston Vasey, a weird village that you can't escape.
Yeah.
Same story as Children of the Stones, but what I'm getting to, and you'll see, like, once you watch Children of the Stones, you will watch 2007's Hot Fuzz completely differently. Just because so much of that is lifted from this thematically. I mean, was it Jim Broadbent as the police lieutenant in that? I'm sure that when they were casting that, they're looking at the headshot of the actor who played Hendrik. I think you already knew his name. Ian
Cuthbertson.
Yeah, Ian Cuthbertson. But it is Edgar Wright like holding up a headshot, being like, "Get me the next Ian Cuthbertson," and Jim Broadbent is like, "Well, I've got this." So, it feels so exactly that there's a group of cultists who are indoctrinating new people into this town, into this village, to be agreeable and benign and bland, and I don't know, have the most picturesque village in all of the UK. It's Hot Fuzz just is, it's borrowing so much from Children of the Stones that, I don't know, to see it again you'll be like, oh, I see where they got the idea.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Happy day.
Yeah. You're getting ahead of me. Is there anything you wanted to say, or should I just keep blathering on about all these wild connections that I found in this?
Why, Tim, I can't rein you in now. It would break your neck.
All right. I mean, yeah, we don't have a Timothy Dalton character in this, which I know, Jen, that turned you off immediately.
Well, I was like, this is a kid's show, so
yeah.
I should keep my mind clean.
Well, what did you call it?
I called it Wicker Man for Kids.
Yeah, Wicker Kids.
Yeah, and you came
Kid.
up with Wicker Boy, basically.
Oh, yeah.
But I will say this really quickly, because there is no romance as such in this, but the amount of double entendres that happen between Professor Brake and
Is it Margaret?
yes, Lady. There are women in this.
Well, yeah, there's a mother and a daughter. Margaret, who is the museum curator, and her daughter, Sandra, who is one of the normal school kids.
Right. But like just really quickly, like I was saying, there is so much dialogue in this that could be taken in a fun way, to the point where I wondered if the writer wasn't doing it on purpose. It was like, I'm making this show for kids, so you can't really put romance in it, but like, come on, like these two are gonna connect. They're two like intelligent single people.
No, yeah, two normal people in this village of
Weirdos.
Happy ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nutters.
Yes. And they do have a little moment at the end, which is nice. But there are all these lines like her saying to him, "Teach me, professor." And it's like, oh, I'll teach you all right.
Yeah, they do get along well. Yeah, as two single normal people in a village of nutters.
Yeah, or like when she asks him, because she wants him to go touch the big rock, and she says, I want to find out if you're the kind of man that I think you are. I was like, damn, he is crushing right now. Go for it, dude.
Yeah.
And then he goes and touches the rock.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And he enters a fugue state and has a premonition that he can't make sense of, nor can we, the audience, although upon rewatching, it is abundantly clear what is happening.
As you do when you touch ancient megaliths.
Always,
if you're
yeah.
sensitive, anyway.
Yeah, that always happens to me. He is the sensitive 70s man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right, so the professor, the scientist and his son, and again, this being for teens, like the teens play teens who act like teens in this, which is normal.
Yes.
It isn't just, like I mentioned, the valid concern of being like, well, I got to move to a new town and like I got to try and make friends again. Or like, there's the anxiety too of like, well, what if I just don't fit in? Ask me how I know. Riding your bikes around town, which he does, quarreling with other students, and kind of, getting the lay of the land socially. And even like he gets tripped by one of the other students in class. And it's like, well, that's fucking rude to like haze the new kid. But the one who does is like, well, I just want to find out if he's normal. And Sandra, the other, like the clever daughter of Margaret, she's like, it's okay. He's one of us.
Right.
He's a human, because the kids already know what's going on. Sandra, who she and her mother had moved there like 6 weeks prior, and they're like, well, this place is a little weird.
Yeah.
But they hadn't put it together. It's only until the story starts where you meet the protagonist who eventually changes things. Ideally.
I swear. And I don't actually think this about this series.
Yeah.
It's unkind. I thought you were going to say, well, they don't put it together. They only learn about it when two men come to town.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I don't think that's what's going on in this serial. I don't think it's sexist unintentionally or intentionally, but
yeah.
I just thought you were going to be sexist.
Why would you assume that, Jay? Because I'm a man.
Well, I'm just a dumb hole, so
That's true. You do make a lot of stupid mistakes that I have to correct. But yeah, this weird reclusive little village of Millbury exists inside this stone circle that is established from the outset. And they're like, oh, it's 1,000 years older than Stonehenge. But it isn't aligned with like the sun or the moon in the way Stonehenge is. It's aligned with something else. Someone give me a perception check.
Okay, and this is where we...
Does anyone have library use?
This is where we start getting into like science and math.
Yeah. And this is what I like about this is that it also gets my science and your occult. Hello. Or vice versa, like your occult and my science. Which I like, but I also think that maybe it's not a significant distinction in this era of like British sci-fi.
I think that could be true. And the tug of war between science and the mystical is set up right away in an incredibly subtle way. Again, show for kids. When
not in a stupid way like Prometheus.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
that is exactly right.
Right.
Oh man.
But go on.
Damn, what a great observation, Tim. When you have the professor kind of joshing with his son about like the spelling of the word phantasmagoric, and for the professor, it refers to like a scientific experience, and for the son, it refers to something a little more mystical.
Yeah, it's got two different points of view.
Right. And however, like this kid also has like a brilliant science mind. This is a really accurate depiction of an only child. Because they do tend to be little adults.
Yeah, and it fits too because when Brake is down at the pub having a drink with Hendrik, who is the sort of the patron, like the lord of this village, he's asking him, so what do you think Matthew's going to be when he grows up? And Brake is like, well, astrophysicist, I suppose. He's his father's son.
Right.
And he does do like scientific things. Like this is these are atypical protagonists outside of like I mentioned earlier, speaking from my limited vocabulary of like a Call of Cthulhu adventure, where it's like no one here uses a gun or would know how. Like no one punches anyone. It is them investigating this phenomenon that they can't understand. And the exciting synergy of science with the occult is that they are using science, like legit hard science, to try to understand this unknown phenomenon, which Brake does address when he's talking to Margaret. He's like, where would science be if we didn't ask questions? And it doesn't lean into mysticism. They present explanations that are mystical but not understood, and it does get on board with pseudoscientific ideas without it feeling like we're kind of dumbing down things for the audience. It's saying, we don't know how this thing works, but we know that it does.
That's another really good point because, and they do hang a lantern on it a little bit because, it's kind of like a Mulder and Scully dynamic almost with Margaret and
it's a great way of putting it.
And Adam Blake, because the professor, being like a man of science, is skeptical at first, and not in a dick way, because he's
unusual. I know.
Yeah, he's smart. He's going to try and smash, so he knows not to come off too strong right off the bat. But Margaret is able to explain to him a lot of the kind of out there woo-woo concepts that also play a part in the story, because along with the science, we also get into stuff like ley lines, like telepathic communication.
Yeah, psychic phenomenon that, again, Margaret just tosses off where it's like, oh, it's a cynometry or whatever. I don't know. It's in the role-playing books that I grew up with, it was called object read, so whatever that's called.
I will take your word for it.
Yeah, I mean, I can look it up again. They, like you said, Margaret presents, I wouldn't necessarily call it pseudoscience in this context, but it is saying, whether it is valid or not, these were the things that people thought were important in, ancient times.
Right.
There were ley lines and, mystical energy stores and sacred sites. Like, why did people think any site was sacred at the time? Ask them, It doesn't make any sense to us now, but the point is that whether you were, a druid in like 3000 BC or a university scientist in the 70s, you're trying to understand an unknowable phenomenon with the best tools you have.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so in this way, it's dismissive to just say, oh, it's a cult, it's pseudoscience. It's saying something is happening here that I can't explain, And Brake, as a scientist, takes his scientific equipment and tries to understand it. Maybe he doesn't understand how it works or why, but he can at least observe it in a way that is quantifiable to maybe try to at least understand it on its terms, whatever this thing is.
Right.
So, yeah, it doesn't have to dumb things down in a way that kind of mixes or just like undermines science by just conflating it with basically just made up bullshit like you'd see on like the History Channel.
Yeah, at no point do we meet Nostradamus.
Right. Yeah, at no point do we hear someone say it's aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a plot point about the stones that surround the city being magnetic and like hugely magnetic, like attach a horseshoe to it magnetic.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, but also it's like, this is a story, whatever.
Right.
We're describing it we're using imperfect terms to describe a phenomenon we don't understand. So it's like, Margaret is like, oh, it's psychic. And he's like, no, it's static electricity. It's magnetic forces. And it's like, hey, whatever term you want to call it, we're observing the same thing.
Yes.
So it does walk that line between what do we know now versus what did people superstitiously believe in, ancient times. And there is a parallel to two of those where it's saying, we're just trying to understand this thing that is basically unknowable, which then fits into like a whole Lovecraftian angle. And you can see the lineage of this from the 70s following the basically like the scientist protagonist of Quatermass serials that were themselves based on Lovecraftian stories or Lovecraft stories. So, and even those, this is something that had been mentioned in like the sort of role-playing circles, is that we tend to think of H.P. Lovecraft stories as taking place within like a particular vintage, like the 20s and 30s, and so a lot of Call of Cthulhu is played in that like retro style. But the thing that people had tended to overlook for the longest time is that they weren't retro stories when they came out. They were cutting edge sci-fi stories, basically. The thing that people point to a lot is I forget what the story was, but like it involved a submarine. Like submarines were new fantastic technology, and it's the same thing like you see in like a Quatermass serial, where it's like, well, we're going to bring in our scientific equipment and we're going to like study the electromagnetic readings of this person's brain to try to like get remote viewing working on this computer. And so yeah, it is not whatsoever out of place in Children of the Stones to say, we're going to take our magnetic field reading equipment out to this stone circle in rural England, which when you put it all together is mwah. It's quintessential British folk horror / sci-fi. It's perfect. Like it's such, like I said at the top of the episode, it's an exemplar of the genre.
Yes, and it has been regarded as such since it came out. This is actually one that we're talking about that people clued into at the time. It was very praised at the time. It has only grown in reputation since then. It might only be obscure to maybe American viewers.
Yeah, like us.
Yes.
We're finding out about now and being like, oh, this thing is so cool from 50 odd years ago.
Well, if anybody would like to sample for themselves, it is freely available on YouTube.
Yeah. As long as you pay your BBC license, too. Don't forget.
Watch out for the cat detector van.
Yeah. Also, don't forget to pay your HISPOD license, too.
Yes.
To keep this show going.
Yeah, hopefully you're not pirating this.
Yeah, if you like these episodes, go to Ko-Fi and drop us some coinage.
Yes, please do. Because honestly, if you're pirating this, like, what? Why?
Yeah, go pirate Deadpool versus Wolverine or something. We need to get better at promoting this show rather than stumbling all over our words.
You're right.
Yeah, but we were saying, there's a painting that foretells the end of the series, but you don't know that yet.
It's pretty cool. It makes an old lady faint.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's hard to get an old British woman to faint.
Ooh.
Matthew and Sandra, they've got to stick together because they're still human. He makes the acquaintance of Di, the Freddie Jones character, the poacher who just lives basically homeless in the village. Around them, just things start to get creepier. The more that they uncover, the weirder things get. Because that's the thing that I think is also significant in this blending of science fiction and the occult, is that no matter how much equipment you bring with you and no matter how much data you collect, like, it's not going to help you ultimately.
Right.
It'll help lead you to the problem, but it won't give you a solution. You'll just be like, well, this is even stranger than I thought. Things continue to get stranger, and I actually kind of don't want to get into spoilers because as it unfolds, it was a really enjoyable experience for me at this point. Listener, you could just be like, all right, I'll just listen to your episode on Horror Express or something. The one on ghost stories, like that one's a really good one.
Well, yeah, actually,
Jen,
that's fair because, as you all know, we have a very lax spoiler policy on the show. Let's just say that, hey, maybe at this point, you might want to actually check it out before you hear us
pause
ruin
this
everything.
episode. Right, yeah, and come back to it. I know, like, altogether it is 2.5 hours, which I saw that and I'm like, this was aimed at kids. Like, that's the one thing that I took issue with. But finding out that it was actually 7 episodes, I'm like, that is far more manageable.
Yeah, it's not a feature. It's a series.
Yeah. And it was funny too that it being aimed at school age kids, then as things happen, Sandra mentioning, I wanted to check that he was human, because what happens is, every couple of evenings, and Matthew observes this, except he gets bonked on the head and isn't sure if it was a dream or what, but he observed everyone out in the town going out and forming a circle and, chanting this discordant tune. And then the next day at school, one of his fellow dum-dums who just can't do math to save his arse, suddenly he's writing, quadratic equations and doing calculus on the board. I'm just like, oh, this kid suddenly got smart. And he's also a lot more upbeat and passive and non-aggressive. Yeah, he becomes what Sandra refers to as the happy ones.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a British take on Invasion of the Body Snatchers, almost.
Village of the Damned? Yeah. I forget the point that I'd set aside to get on that tangent.
Well, you were talking about the kids going from normal to super smart and also extremely pleasant.
Yeah, and that is sort of the central mystery of why are these people getting like this? And even Sandra's like, well, I miss me with that shit. I don't want to become like a Stepford wife. And as they continue to investigate this, and they uncover more clues from looking at the painting. It gives them different leads on things to check out. They hang out with Di, who again the poacher who just sleeps in a crypt and seems like a weirdo. Also has an amulet that protects him. They meet or they go to the museum that Margaret's the curator of. Find the skeleton of the guy who was crushed by one of the stones, the barber surgeon from antiquity.
Poor guy.
We're kind of starting to get a better picture of what's going on in this town, though admittedly an imperfect one. We're detecting phenomena with our inferior scientific equipment, things that are outside our understanding. But we learned that the stone circle is all perfectly upright. It is over a concave stone structure underneath, so a sort of dish shape, a receiver, if you will, not aligned with the sun or the moon, but at something else. And again, sticking with the sci-fi thing, Brake sends a telegram to Mount Palomar Observatory in San Diego, which is a neat bit of research to be like, hey, what is the stone circle pointing at? And it's like, well, it's pointing at a black hole that is the result of a supernova that was discovered by this guy some time ago. It was it Hendrix supernova? Oh, the name of the Lord of the Manor.
Oh, dear me. I should have introduced myself properly. It's like, yeah,
Right,
I'm like a really well-known, like, astronomer.
Yeah, sorry, I'm the villain who retired here after receiving, and again, like, so much, like, Lovecraftian pulp horror stuff in it. I retired here after receiving some papers like the Ramblings of a Lunatic, who happened to mention amongst all this, what do you call it, like doggerel Latin?
Dog Latin, yeah.
Yeah. That was, oh, by the way, someone observed a supernova here, thousands of years ago. And just like, oh, that's important. That's kind of relevant to my work as an astronomer. And then he came here and he got sucked into this.
Well, he couldn't pass up the opportunity to have so many children.
Right, yeah, because he is what Brake and Matthew accuse to be the magus of controlling this village. And I don't want to get into like a GIF versus GIF pronunciation war here. I thought it was pronounced magus.
I couldn't tell you.
Anyway, druid wizard.
Yes. So
it is funny when Brake is basically, as a modern enlightened man of science, is kind of running down the superstitious primitive cave dwellers, and Hendrik, who it turns out has been here a very long time, kind of gives him the same steady now.
Just hold on, Mr. Smarty Pants.
Yeah. They knew some things that you didn't know they knew, because this stone receiver is set up to receive the waves from the collapsed supernova directed at this part of Earth that sucks up all the negative emotions of the people who become happy ones, which you're like, what the fuck? This is for kids?
That's cool. It's like electric lithium.
It is a wild premise because Hendrik at this point is basically reveals himself to be the priest who is making sacrifices to his god.
Yeah.
And the sacrifice is the capacity to do evil, which you kind of read that back and you're like, that makes sense. I can see why he thinks he's doing the right thing, the villain in this. You're like, this all holds together.
Yeah.
So I'm really impressed with how they synthesize all these different elements, these genre ideas into this cracking story. Science and the occult, yeah.
Meanwhile, in the United States, people were watching The Brady Bunch.
Well, I mean, that was an ensemble show that was really reflective of, I don't know.
You know, when Peter Brady got
they had
his
6
astrophysics degree, like the show really took off.
Yeah. When Marcia became psychic.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. Or no, it was Jan. Yeah, see, no one cares. Yeah, but as the tale winds on, and again, like, this is paced so well, like, it's the sort of thing that it's an adventure I would love to play. They find out about the old church that is, the Magus' manor. It was deconsecrated because Christianity never took hold here. Like, the pagans rejected it.
This is
again,
primo
like,
folk horror, people. Ancient religions, pre-Christianity.
Takes place outside, yeah. This is very, Wicker Man, where it's just this enclave of pagans that are like, yeah, we've been doing it this way for 40 centuries, and it's been working pretty good so far.
Yeah, why stop now?
Yeah, so take your crucifixion superstitions somewhere else. We're all full of crazy here. Yeah, so they piece together the details. The black hole is in the constellation of Ursa Major. They discuss ancient bear religions, as the bear being a figure worthy of worship, I guess, to primitive people. Why not?
Yeah, because when you're basically starting from zero, Like,
Yeah.
as an early human, you're looking around and you're like, I'm feeling kind of like spiritual. So what can I worship? And it's like, like I could worship the cave or this rock, but it's not very impressive. But that huge thing out there that could kill me,
Right, yeah.
that's worth worshiping.
I fear and revere an animal that weighs, 4 times what I do.
Yeah.
that can tear me limb from limb. Like, yeah, that is an animal worthy of reverence.
Yes.
So, yeah. And then, things get out of hand, blah, blah, blah. You got a religion. But, yeah, they're eventually the kids discover the presence of the old church, but they don't investigate it because it is, the villain's lair, basically. It's only further along in the story after everything has kind of really gone to shit, because we find out that the way that new visitors are indoctrinated to become one of the happy ones is by performing this ritual where everyone forms that circle and makes all that discordant singing while the black hole passes over the city, and the shape of the stone receives the energy from the black hole, and people basically get like brainwashed. And there's a little bit of hand waving in there, sure, but it's like everything is accounted for in the series of events here. Like there's no thing where it's like they don't hand wave like the in between, like, well, how does the how to get from the from the boat to the house. It's like, well, everything fits together, and I really appreciate that about the premise.
Yes.
So so people who we only met tangentially, one of the other school kids, like, he becomes a happy one, which sucks because they take him to meet Dai, and Dai is kind of the like one wild card in all this,
Right.
And and his amulet gets broken, and the kid's like, it's just basically doing like leering shitty kid kind of acting, where it's like, you prick.
Yeah.
I hate you, you little bastard. So he's one of the happy ones, and then they need 4 more to complete their set, I guess. And next up, in order of people who visited, Hendrik invites Margaret and her daughter to come to dinner, and that's the ritual where they're going to get turned.
Yep.
Which would maybe be my one quibble about this. I mean, maybe you got to be English, but it's like, why don't you just not go to dinner? Although they do explain that earlier, and this has, again, speaking of other things that have kind of drawn on this, or at least have similarities to it, when Matthew witnesses the ritual and he gets bonked on the head, like the doctor comes, like this village doctor that has nothing to do because everyone's healthy.
Yeah.
Wonder how that happened. But he's like, oh yeah, I got invited to dinner, but an old patient contacted me, so I had to cancel. And he tried to leave town, but then he didn't.
Right. And then he comes back suspiciously pleasant.
Yeah. And you'll notice that this is another thing that happens in Hobbs End in the movie In the Mouth of Madness, where people aren't able to leave.
Right.
Like, you think you start to leave, and suddenly it's like, oh no, I'm back here again. Yeah, it's a trope that is popular enough that we keep seeing it. Also, Hobbs End, a reference to Quatermass in the Pit.
Oh yeah, I should watch that again. I love the Quatermass stuff, even in spite of Brian Donlevy.
Well, I mean, hey, nobody's perfect, huh? Yeah. So, yeah, he thinks that he's going to leave town, but he doesn't. So I guess in that way, it's kind of a foregone conclusion, whatever choice Margaret makes and whether she meets Hendrik for dinner or not. Mm-hmm. It's like, he'll decide, like, if it's not tonight, it'll be the next night. Eventually, you're going to get got.
Yeah.
So it is unfortunate that this is, they kind of recede into, like, non-player character agency at that point, where it's like, all right, your two characters are going to dinner, and the players are like, oh, bullshit, railroading, blah blah. I'm like, fuck you, we're almost done with this adventure. So yeah, they go to dinner and they get happy day-itis.
Yeah, they get the treatment.
Yeah.
In Hendrik's cool dining room, which is everything is like hewn out of stone. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's impressive. I mean, isn't that what you're going to say? That's what everyone else says. So yeah, and it is a drag, that two likable characters basically get like mind wiped in this. And we see it happen through Matthew because he's got that object reading where he can experience the thoughts of the other person by like holding something that they're attached to.
Doesn't even have to be a conductive material either.
Right, yeah. So they a nod to the rules lawyers who like got an A in like high school physics or something. Like, how would it work? It's non-conductive.
Look, just watch the show.
Yeah, shut up and stack your dice. So yeah, we're able to experience through Matthew what Margaret is experiencing because he's like, well, let's see, I suddenly feel tense. Basically, when you're like, oh, Hendrik is Lord Summerisle of this this village.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, now I feel like this intense light and something, and suddenly Margaret's gone. I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah.
It's not good. Which my only quibble with this would be, while this is happening, Brake and Matthew were just kind of like sitting on their hands or like having dinner at home, and he's like, well, Margaret, if you don't get your brain eaten, come back for like a nightcap. And it's like, yeah, okay. Just like, what can you do?
Well, yeah, what
know.
can you do? Like, it would be very rude to just go charging in there.
Yeah,
very
and I mean, and I suppose it'd just be at that point, Hendrik would just be like, okay, 4 for dinner.
Yeah.
We can do this. Yeah, like what does he care? So it might be a foregone conclusion. But yeah, that's the point where, we lose Margaret, although she comes over the next day and is like, oh no, I didn't go to dinner. I, stayed home. Yeah, Sandra wasn't feeling well. Sure, that's it. Well, anyway, I'm not upset about it. You could say I'm one of the happy ones. And at that point, Brake's like, damn it.
No.
Is trying to get in that.
The one woman of reproductive age in this town.
Yeah. It was either her or the one who runs the tourist shop.
Oh, yeah. Well, she's a little dried out.
Yeah, a little bit.
And the school teacher's kind of mid, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure she's one of them. And it is interesting, too, that despite all the villagers being happy ones, Hendrik is not. Because he's like, well, I have to maintain a respectable distance, don't I?
Yeah, which...
Like you say, like, these are all my children.
Yeah, plus he doesn't want to dance in the silly clothes.
Yeah, he doesn't want to take up Morris dancing, which I can understand.
Yeah, it's pretty good out.
Yeah. And they do address that, where it's like, well, how much of this is just, like, goofy village traditions versus something more insidious?
Right.
And that's that is the horror, isn't it? Like, well, you'll never know until it's too late.
Yeah.
Like suddenly you're just out with your buddies, clubbing seals in Newfoundland, being like, "Hey, it's great, it's a party." Like, I don't know. This is just what people do. What's your problem? Why are you so uptight?
Yeah, what else are we gonna do with these pelts?
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, there are thousands of these things. Lighten up.
Where do you think your boot lining comes from, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, anyway. Yeah, so things go badly for Margaret. And at this point, Brake and Matthew are like, let's get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like the last 2 characters in this Call of Cthulhu adventure being like, we're just going to leave. We're going to run.
Yeah.
Like everyone else has tried, and our party has just been whittled down. So until like it's just the 2 of us, or maybe one of us, or it's just a TPK, like we're just gonna leave. We're gonna call this one.
Yeah, we're gonna take our normal brains and run.
Yeah, which I have done in convention games. Like I ran, and I was the only one who lived, so I was happy about that.
Yes, I'm glad that you got to play as someone with a normal brain, Tim.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's great too because at the end of the adventure, I'm like, stay out of Cincinnati. just don't go there. Yeah, so, and they got kind of the same lesson, like, stay out of Millbury. But not before things are further complicated. They go to leave. Matthew realizes he needs the painting because how else are you going to make, easy exposition without it? On the way, he sees Hendrik coming out of the abandoned church. He meets Sandra, who is very upbeat all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Which is
disconcertingly
apparently
so.
Yeah, apparently, like, at the time, viewers are like, oh, that reveal of, like, Sandra, that she had been turned, and she's like, oh, hello, Matthew. So
No.
nice to see you. It's just like, oh, damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you do really feel this creeping sense of dread, and it's just like a mother and her daughter go to dinner. It shouldn't be
Yeah.
as nail biting as it is, but it's like, oh god, oh shit, this is it. This
Yeah.
is bad. This is gonna end up bad.
Yeah, and there's, like, a metaphorical concern there, too, where it's like, if I stay in this town too long, like, is this how I'm gonna be?
Yeah. Will I also Morris dance?
Yeah, any transplants from a small town perhaps can understand where I'm coming from. Yeah, but yeah, that's the point too, where Matthew sees Hendrik coming out of the church that has been, like, off limits. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's right on the map, and none of the characters thought to go there. Till they do, and he finds, like, computers
Yeah.
and the equipment for an atomic clock.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They had
which
digital
in the
clocks
earlier
back
scene,
then. Can you believe it?
Yeah, and in an earlier scene when Margaret goes to dinner, Hendrik points out, because he's got all these digital clocks around, because it's important for an astronomer to know the exact time that some things happen.
Yep.
Like perhaps a black hole passing directly over Millbury, so that you can brainwash people and make a perfect little town until, I don't know, Simon Pegg and Nick Frost come to town. Shoot the place up.
And then they mix everything with American big budget action films.
Right, yeah. And then abrupt tonal shifts 3/4 of the way through the story. But yeah, like, everything in this, like, holds together, and so much of it has been influential on, folk horror and British sci-fi and, genre TV since then. That, yeah, it's a great story worth, experiencing, especially because when Brake and Matthew try to leave, they find themselves in the same situation as Margaret and the village doctor before that, where it's like, yeah, we were headed out of town, and then we woke up in the manor house in Hendrik's clutches, basically. And it's like, well, now it's your turn.
It's almost as though
to
we're
become
dealing
one of
with
the happy
cosmic
ones.
forces that we can barely comprehend.
Yeah, a lot like that.
I hate when that happens.
Right, yeah. One of the other interesting things about Dai is that, well, Dai is killed off in a way that is prefaced in the story, because they talk of the barber surgeon who was crushed by one of the monoliths.
Yeah, which took me a long ass time to put together. I think my brain was struggling by this point, because I am very stupid. I did get
Yes.
what was going on. It's because, again, this is for children, and that includes mental children like myself.
Yeah, it should have been right at your speed.
So I totally followed it, and I'll say this: it's actually okay if your brain glosses over some of the science and the occultism, and which way the stones are pointing, and where the ley lines meet, and whether it's
broad strokes, it all fits.
yeah,
like,
whether it's receiving or transmitting. You can, if you just roll with it, it's fine.
Yeah, it is one of those things where you don't need to be like, well, is the soil around the monolith, is that igneous rock or sedimentary? Because I think this is very key. It's like, shut the fuck up. That's not the point of the scene.
Yeah, save that for CinemaSins, buddy.
Right, yeah. Things that don't matter. But yeah, like Jen says, if you kind of take it in broad strokes, it all makes sense. And the fate of Dai, the die was cast, you might say.
And he died.
Yeah, Dai does die, in the same way that the barber surgeon dies, which just sounds like a reprehensible line of work, a dubious one, to say the least. And you can make that connection between whoever this barber surgeon was and Dai as a sort of wild card in all this.
Yeah. Isn't it wild that at one point in human history, like, if you had a toothache, you went to the barber?
You went to the same guy who cut your hair?
Yeah. And he
like,
would
I don't know,
pull
he
your
works with
teeth out,
sharp
because what else is he going to do? He's not going to, like, scale your gum line or anything. He's
Right.
kind of limited in his scope of knowledge. And it's not because these people were like stupider than we were. These are people that match
modern
our
humans have-
intelligence.
Yeah, modern humans are like 200,000 years old. A person from 200,000 years ago is as sharp and cunning as duplicitous as any modern person that you're likely to meet.
Yeah, and
I could have said, enterprising and, innovative, but whatever.
yeah, and
I went
considering
the other way.
some of the things that were accomplished, like in fact, let's take as just an out there example,
Okay.
circles of megalithic stones in ancient
Okay.
Britain. I don't know why I'm thinking about that right now, but that's just the example that came to mind.
Are you perhaps holding something that is impressing that upon your mind?
Yeah, I don't know where this scarf came from, but I'm feeling things. Just the fact that early man was able to do that kind of thing, to pull together and create these things, working without mass media, sometimes without written language.
Yeah. And you're right, because even like at the time, yeah, like a Stonehenge or a stone circle of any sort, I mean, that is basically rocket science. Like,
Yeah.
like you say, like if you don't have language, if you don't have like written words, if you don't have an education, hell, drop any of us in Stonehenge and be like, how does this work? What does this do? And be like, fuck if I know.
Yeah.
Like, well, you're stupider than a caveman then, aren't you?
Yeah, like, oh, you don't know how to trim this horse's hooves? Like, what are you good for? You can't, like,
Right,
cook
yeah.
a meal in, like, a stone pot?
Right. Yeah. We
Like, go hang out with the
arranged
village
this-
idiot who is totally
Yeah.
fine because we haven't yet medicalized madness.
Yeah, it is. Look, we arrange these stones in a circle. Do we need to spell it out for you? Like, well, yeah, because I don't know. I don't understand.
There's no internet here. I'm gonna die.
Yeah, I can't look it up. Like, I gotta use like a paper map to like find things. I gotta like write things down.
Yeah. Now, and
Oh,
I'm
primitive.
the kind of person who, being a technologically advanced modern human in the year 2024, if you asked me to point north, I would have to think about it for quite a while before I hazarded a guess.
Oh yeah, hell, I get lost going into Silver Lake because it's at like a 40-degree angle.
Yeah. Yeah, like when the streets
that
aren't
place
grids
is
anymore, it
cursed.
fucks you up.
Yeah, right. So, yeah.
I feel so seen, Tim.
Right. Yeah. So if if you are listening straw man, I guess, want to be dismissive of like how Stonehenge works, like go there. Yeah, like, use it.
Yeah.
Or hell, walk into an observatory and like try to find a particular star. Like shit's difficult. They just had primitive tools to work with, but early humans were very enterprising, and yeah, it's dismissive to just be like, what a bunch of superstitious idiots.
Yeah.
Well, they're working with what parlance they had. Not like an atomic clock, not like nowadays.
No.
Yeah. So Hendrik, has the two of them scheduled for the mind wipe to become happy ones, but because because Brake, made his luck roll. It's like, well, I have like scientific equipment with me, right? And then like the DM's like reluctantly, yes. It's like, I'm gonna use that to hack the atomic clock, and you're like, fuck, all right, give me an electronics roll. And it's like, bam, 01. Like, fuck, okay. You hack the atomic clock. They set it 5 minutes early. They throw a spanner, or a wrench to you Americans, in Hendrik's plan. They don't get the mind wipe, and they fuck everything up, because then they're indoctrinated into that pure circle of everyone just being a hive mind, and it kind of snaps everyone out of it. Like, even Sandra's like, where am I?
Yeah.
Like, what happened? And then things really go to shit. And this set piece that wraps up, minus the denouement, that wraps up this series is fucking wild.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
Like let's throw some body horror in there at the end.
Yeah, I mean, it is how you want a like Cthulhu one shot to go, because it is they fucked up the timing. So suddenly Hendrik is there, and like he gets caught in the beam, and he gets reverted back to his like druid form. The receiver is cracked, and now like the black hole energy is just like unleashed across the town, and it's just like a Medusa look.
Yeah.
Just hitting people randomly. They're being turned into the standing stones. You're like, holy shit, this is horrific.
Yeah, and the thing is that you've been prepped for this from the beginning. Like,
yeah, because you've seen the stones. They're vaguely humanoid.
Yeah, even if you're a dumb, stupid idiot like me, you're like, oh shit. Like when You're
like, oh, he gonna get turned to stone.
Yeah, but like for example, when when he what's the word? Passes away.
Passes on. Oh, okay, yes.
I was like, oh shit, because at first there's a stone there, and then there's nothing there.
Yeah,
and it's like, oh god, what's happening? But yeah, people turn into these megaliths. But even having been prepared for it, at the end of the movie, you're like, oh no!
Yeah.
Margaret and Sandra turned into a pillar of salt.
Yeah, and even Dai's death is kind of like harrowing because you realize like Dai's the only one who remembers that this keeps happening.
Yeah.
Which is why he's gone nuts. And yeah, like the villagers are just getting hit by this black hole beam. They're getting turned to stone. And Sandra doesn't make it. Margaret goes in to save Sandra. It is just a regular, vicious cycle of like, that leads to like a TPK where, you lose one player character and someone's like, well, I'm going to try to save him. Now you've lost 2 player characters. And now you don't have enough of a party to like defeat the end boss. It's great. Like, yeah, it is at that point, Brake and Matthew like barely making it out, just cutting their losses, being like, fuck this, we're leaving. They hide in the sanctuary.
What if you moved to a small town and you actually made friends and then they got turned into big rocks?
I have a hard time making friends, even with rocks.
Tim's like, couldn't
you don't
be
get
me.
A lot back, yeah. Right, yeah. Yeah, and again, like while all this is happening, you got like that discordant chanting, like you coming to a crescendo again, where it's just like, I didn't like this theme the first time I heard it. Now I really don't like it.
It's freaky as hell.
Yeah. And yeah, after all that, we get the thing that I love the most about this, because it does mix a lot of different influences and a lot of different I guess mindsets or perspectives. The thing that I most enjoyed about this, that I took away from this, that I like the most, is that there's the idea of the village that you can't leave, which is just kind of a trope that exists a lot of times. These from folklore or whatever, it just becomes a cliche. Like, why is this always the case? I don't know. This is just a thing that was popular and people kept doing it. It's just a matrix that people enjoy working within. But the thing that I really liked about Children of the Stones, in that it is mixing this like folk horror with science, is they talk a lot about this collapsed supernova and this black hole that it's beaming its energy or sucking up energy from this village. But it describes not just a village that you can't leave, but talking as they do of the black hole, the village is actually a sublime metaphor. The stone circle is the black hole.
Oh shit.
The village, yeah.
I didn't even think of that. My brain was just too fried.
Yeah, I mean, it is it is extrapolating in a way that the layman can understand. What is a place that you can never leave?
Oof.
What has a pull that nothing, not even light, can escape? So it is all these like ideas of high-minded, interstellar stuff like gravitic time dilation and like relativistic motion and asymptotic progression towards like this singularity and time slowing down and all of this shit. But that's imposed upon like this idea of an English village.
Yeah.
And at the end, Matthew gets to address that by he basically time is a flat circles the story, before True Detective.
So that's where the creator of True Detective stole it from.
Yeah,
you thought
exactly.
it was Thomas Ligotti, but it was actually Children of the Stones.
Yeah, so it is saying that, if you were, moving at the speed of light at the event horizon of a black hole, time would stop and you'd see yourself ahead of, you'd see like the back of your own head because, you'd be moving at such a speed and things would slow down so that you would basically be stuck in this loop. Again, speaking in broad strokes as the story does, but it's like, yeah, the village is this black hole where, unfortunately, Margaret and Sandra, like you mentioned, there's that kind of touching moment of goodbye between Brake and Margaret. They're past the event horizon. Like, they are trapped in the village. They are sucked into this black hole, and it is just by sheer luck that Brake and Matthew are able to break away and escape the gravitational pull of this village. But things being cyclical, it doesn't end there, and in fact, with different players, it starts over. So you can extrapolate that another Brake and Matthew is going to enter the village and the proceedings are going to continue as they have been. I mentioned a Matrix, but I mean, isn't that the Matrix? The idea that they create it and then someone fucks up, there's an abnormality, then they have to reboot it, and it starts over again and over again and over again.
I bet the Wachowskis have seen this.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Lily Wachowski's on Blue Sky. We should ask her.
Ask her.
Yeah.
Yeah, be like, hey, what do you think of this?
Lily,
she's like,
Ms.
oh my God, they're onto
Wachowski,
me.
do you fuck with Children of the Stones? And she's like, yeah, I saw that ages ago. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, we based one of our second movie on that. we based Bound on the Catermass experiment. It's a loose adaptation.
I really preferred Gina Gershon as Dr. Quatermass to Brian Donlevy.
I would like to see that. Yeah. Brian Donlevy in a bikini just doesn't work.
No. I did like him in Showgirls, though.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I mean, that's from Quatermass. It's like, we're all whores, darling. Right?
Good shit.
Yeah. So at the end, the investigators get to witness the old one, and they all lose their sanity as the keeper planned. And then things just go awry, and at the end, you kind of really don't know where you stand. You haven't defeated the ancient evil; you've merely escaped it. Yeah.
Do you think the kids talked about this in school on Monday, or were they just like unusually quiet?
I think that they greeted each other with "Happy Day." The story has, relevant themes to a teenager about conformity versus individuality.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, like this has come up in other things. Like, what was I watching just the other day? It had the same binary decision where, it was the Roger Corman movie. It Conquered the Earth. All right, maybe a step down, but well, what can I say other than we learned too late that man is a feeling creature, and and so on and so forth. Good movie. Sorry I spoiled it. And it's not fair that we didn't have good stuff ostensibly for children in the 70s. I mean, we had Kolchak. That was
kids loved Kolchak.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, no, it's not to say that there wasn't like quality children's television in the 70s in the U.S. I mean, you had your Sesame Streets, you had your Electric Company. It's just that the rest of television was a vast cultural wasteland.
It wasn't as bad as that. It was bad, but
it was pretty bad, but like there were bright spots. Let's put it that way.
yeah, we'll eventually dig up some other gems. So keep subscribing and listening to and supporting the show, and we'll tell you about more of them.
Yeah, keep watching the skies.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, you can show your support by going to patreon.com/haveyouseen this and make a pledge at the $2 or $5 tier. $5 a month gets the latest episode before everyone else, plus access to our Discord, where we're always arguing about movies. If you'd like to give us a tip, our Ko-Fi link is in the show notes.
I'd expect that amount of notes with this one. I'm going to need your help
What, explaining the plot?
with everything.